president encourages any American across the country with any knowledge of this suspect to please call the FBI, who continue to assist state and local authorities who are leading this investigation on the ground.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news. From immigration officials testifying before the House Homeland Security Committee to the arrival of Buddhist monks in Washington, D.C. at the end of their 2,000-mile walk for peace. But first, we started the morning with a look at lawmakers grilling Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick over his communications with Jeffrey Epstein. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is testifying in front of a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee regarding broadband deployment funding, but he has come under fire as of late for his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, as his name showed up multiple times as Congressman looked yesterday at those unredacted files. So let's get you to that hearing where he's answering questions about his relationship with Epstein.
Why did the Epstein files show you coordinating a meeting and planning a visit with Jeffrey Epstein on his private island in December 2012?
Thank you for the question. I'm glad to be here to make it clear that I met Jeffrey Epstein when I moved to a house next door to him in New York, right? And I met him then. Over the next 14 years, I met him 2 other times that I can recall, 2 times. And that is none for 6 years. So 6 years later, I met him, and then a year and a half after that, I met him, and never again. Probably the total, and you've seen all of these documents, of these millions and millions of documents, there may be 10 emails connecting me with him, probably about 10 emails connecting me with him over a 14-year period. I did not have any relationship with him. I barely had anything to do with that person, okay?
Secretary Lutnick, I think you understand the root of concern here. It's the way you described very emphatically your first encounter with him in his apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you in fact make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, there's not an indication that you yourself engaged in any wrongdoing with Jeffrey Epstein. It's the fact that you believe that you misled the country and the Congress based on your earlier statements, suggesting that you'd cut off all contact when in fact you had not. When you visited the private island, did you see anything inappropriate during that visit?
the only thing I saw with my wife and my children and the other couple and their children was staff who worked for Mr. Epstein on that island.
And you realize that, you know, this visit took place after he'd been convicted, right? I mean, you made a very big point of saying that you sensed that this was a bad person in 2005. And then, of course, in 2008, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution of a minor. And yet you went and had this trip and other interactions. Did you have a dinner in Epstein's New York City home in 2011?
No.
So the information that suggests that there was a dinner with Woody Allen and Woody Allen's spouse at the Epstein residence, that's there's nothing to that, is that right? I
actually don't know what you're referring to. There was, look, I I looked through the millions of documents for my name, just like everybody else. And what I found was there was a document that says that I had a meeting with him on in May, I think, for an hour at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Not dinner or otherwise, for an hour at 5 o'clock.
All right. There's also a reference to the fact that Epstein had expressed an interest in meeting your nanny. Do you know whether Jeffrey Epstein ever met with your nanny?
No, I saw that. I had no idea what that was about. It had nothing to do with me,
No
as far as
interaction
I
at
know.
all with him on that?
No, as far as I know, no.
Would you, Mr. Secretary, be willing to ensure that the file is complete to share with this committee and the Congress your own records, any records you have that relate to Jeffrey Epstein?
I will surely talk about that. I hadn't thought about that. I have nothing to hide, absolutely nothing.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I do think this goes right to the heart of the question of credibility based on the Secretary's earlier statements. I hope to pursue some of the other issues in front of the hearing as we go on. Thank you.
Senator Kennedy.
All right, Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland questioning Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. His name appeared many times in the Epstein files that were recently released. So let's bring in Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George live from Capitol Hill, who's also been listening and following all this. And Joe, I mean, he was there to talk about broadband internet access, equal access for everybody across the country. And it's no surprise that this has turned to questions about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It seems here that they're not trying to say, look, you did anything wrong, but that you misled Congress and the country with your relationship. What did you make from that Q&A right there?
Well, it's an acknowledgement, right, that he was on the island. It's a noteworthy development because of the timing of all of this. As Senator Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, a Democrat, was pointing out in that exchange. It's noteworthy because of what the Miami Herald and Julie Brown was reporting in the last 24 hours about what President Trump said in 2006. There's a new revelation from all of these Epstein documents involving an unreported FBI interview in 2019 that says that in 2006, President Trump called the local chief of police when the investigation was unfolding in South Florida. And President Trump said this: "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." Again, that's President Trump to a local chief of police in 2006. And as Senator Van Hollen was alluding to there, this now Lutnick encounter, this island lunch with his wife, the Secretary of Commerce is very quick to point out that he was with his family here and that he didn't pick up any nefarious activity. But this happens all after that timeline that has been aforementioned. So we knew that the Secretary of Commerce was going to face questions here. Previously, he was very quick to denounce any type of relationship. But as these Epstein documents, as they slowly come out, as more and more information gets revealed, Secretary Lutnick's one of the more high-profile members of the Trump administration, caught up in perhaps a closer relationship than we were led to believe earlier on. And that's what Senator Van Hollen was getting to there. We'll now wait to see for potential fallout involving the Secretary of Commerce, one of the president's top economic advisors here. But a noteworthy acknowledgement here on Capitol Hill on this Tuesday morning, Holly.
Deputy Political Director Joe St. George for us, laying it all out. Coming up on Today's It Happened.
The Ukrainian skeleton racer says he's going to keep fighting to wear a helmet he made honoring fallen athletes at the Milan Cortina Games, despite the International Olympic Committee's decision to ban it.
Welcome back to Today's It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of the day's top stories. The search is on for answers after a plane crashed into multiple cars on a busy highway. This happened in Gainesville, Georgia, about an hour north of Atlanta. The pilot told investigators he was experiencing mechanical problems and trying to land in the safest place. But once he landed, he crashed into 3 different cars. The plane nearly hit a Golden Corral and a Pizza Hut, but luckily no one was seriously hurt. We now know why actress Catherine O'Hara died. Days after her passing shocked Hollywood. According to the medical examiner, the 71-year-old suffered a blood clot in her lungs, and officials say rectal cancer was the underlying cause. O'Hara is most known for her role in Schitt's Creek and Home Alone. She's survived by her husband, Beau, and their sons, Matthew and Luke. The operator for Eddie Bauer has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That means 180 stores in the United States and Canada are at risk of closing. The iconic outdoors brand points to declining sales and supply chain challenges as reasons for the bankruptcy. Officials say the retail stores will continue to operate as normal, but if a buyer is not found, they'll be forced to shut down for good. Eddie Bauer has been around since 1920. Singer-songwriter Chappell Roan is splitting up with her talent agency over the Epstein files. In an Instagram post today, Roan said she's no longer being represented by Wasserman. Casey Wasserman, founder of the firm, was identified in a recent batch of Epstein files as exchanging messages with Ghislaine Maxwell more than 20 years ago. The singer went on to say artists deserve representation that aligns with their values and supports their safety and dignity. It's a story sparking a conversation worldwide. The Olympic Committee is banning a Ukrainian athlete from wearing a helmet that honors fellow athletes killed in the war with Russia. Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini live in Kyiv, Ukraine for us. And Jason, you have been reporting from this area for some time. We all have seen the stories about this helmet. We've seen the helmet. Even President Zelensky's commented on it. So what can you tell us about what's happening today?
Well, what's going on right now is the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, it made its decision, and it's going to make an exception for this athlete, allowing him to wear a black armband, no faces on it, no messages on it, just a black armband. But Heraskovich, he's disappointed, and he says he's still going to compete, but he's not backing down on the helmet, saying that he's going to keep fighting to be able to wear it. And as you noted, this helmet honors more than 20 athletes and coaches killed since the invasion. That includes a figure skater, Dmytro Sharpar. He's a former teammate who died on the front lines. And Heraskovich says that he knew many of these athletes personally. The IOC invoked Rule number 50, which means no political statements are allowed at the games. And they offered a black armband as their compromise, and really they had to explain this to the public earlier today. Listen.
We have to concentrate on the athletes' performance and sport on the field of play. And it's fundamental that there are equal rights for all athletes, and that the games need to be separated, not just from political and religious, but from all types of interference, call it interference, and that so that all the athletes competing can concentrate on their performance.
Ukraine's President Zelensky weighed in today on this matter, and he thanked Heraskovich for reminding the world the price of our struggle. But it seems that this controversy has actually drawn a lot more attention to this struggle. Some call it, the Streisand effect at work here, with this becoming a front and center controversy. And as far as this decision to allow him to wear a black armband, he says he's not going to wear that, and he's going to continue fighting to be able to wear that helmet that he created.
Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini live for us. Thank you for that update, and stay safe over there in Kyiv. Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
The prayers of this entire White House are with Savannah and her family at this time, and we hope this person is found soon and that her mother is brought home safely.
Glad you're back with Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top headlines.
I was once again with the president. He and I were both reviewing the newly released surveillance footage from FBI in the Savannah Guthrie case.
We continue to follow the breaking news. The FBI just releasing 4 photos and now 2 videos of a potential suspect in connection with the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. Scripps News senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha is live in Pima County, Arizona. She has the latest. Lori Jane, I understand the FBI releasing not one, but at least 4 photos, and now these 2 videos. You've been poring over them. What do you see?
Yeah, Del, well, we actually now have 3 videos. They are just posting these as we see them, and basically it's very clear images. Unfortunately, the person is also very heavily covered. It's from the front door of Nancy Guthrie's home. We know that her doorbell camera was missing when investigators came to research her house. And we know who appears to be fiddling with something at the front door. You can see this person is heavily masked. They're wearing a backpack. They have a jacket on that's zipped up very high, potentially to block any hairs or other pieces of DNA to fall off. That is what one might wonder. The FBI also says this person is armed. In one of the images, it looks like there's a kind of a white object hanging from the front of their pants or on a belt. Again, this person is very covered up. The only thing you can really see is their eyes. So it's certain that the investigators are going to be reliant on anyone who can recognize the mannerisms of this person or how they are walking. In his post on X, you may be wondering how these images came to be, because we had heard that there wasn't any subscription service or that Nancy Guthrie's camera had retained anything. But Kash Patel says these images were recovered from residual data that was located in back-end systems, and he said this was a cooperation between law enforcement and private sector people. But lots of clear videos, certainly a huge break in this case, a huge development, and now they are going to be turning to the public for help if anybody recognizes anything in these images. Del?
Lori Jane, am I making too much of the fact that the FBI director says that it took them 8 days to basically work with the private sector to glean these images? She's been missing now for 10 days, which is a 2-day lag, which is an indication that they might have held these images hoping and maybe tracking down this particular suspect. Am I making too much of that 2-day time difference between the timeline that now appears to be different?
Well, you never know what's going on behind the scenes, and of course, as you pointed out earlier, this is kind of a new development to know that you could recover this type of data and video from this type of system that wasn't subscription based or wasn't attached to anything. So it's quite interesting. I don't know how long they've had this, but there's always stuff happening behind the scenes. Of course, as the public, you always want answers. You want answers immediately, and you think, but these are just people too. They're doing their jobs. They have to collect evidence. They have to do it very methodically, and they also have to follow the law. And I think they probably have to get people on board to make sure every little step is going correctly. So, it would be nice if we could be in the room when investigators are doing their investigations, so we know every little piece of information. Unfortunately, we hadn't heard from them for several days, so I think this is a really nice light for the community, for the Guthrie family, in hopes that maybe this will be one step closer to bringing Nancy home.
Lori Jane, my apologies, by the way, to the people at Nest Camera. It is a Nest Camera video as opposed to a Ring Camera video. I'm sure the people at Nest would like to let everybody know that their cameras do work quite well. But that being the case, now the FBI will take this backwards, correct me if I'm wrong, to trace the steps and any cameras that may be in the area that would show us this particular suspect before he or she even approached Nancy Guthrie's house, and take it backwards from there. We saw that with the case of the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, where they started out with one image in downtown Manhattan and then took it all the way back to where he got, I believe it was on the New York City subway system.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable, all of the technology these days, and what we can see and what we can go for. So I think probably they're going to be going back to every store. We know that they had visited a convenience store. They're going to be doing anything from traffic lights, anywhere that there's a camera, probably looking, and anywhere that there's people who didn't subscribe, also trying to see if there's any video that was preserved that might help them solve this case. Of course, this opens so many questions too, like, was this person acting alone? Was there a second person who came in after the camera was removed? I mean, it's very interesting to think about moving a person alone, so there's all sorts of questions that these videos are now presenting, and I think hopefully anybody that recognizes that backpack, the clothing, the shoes, will call authorities, and we know that people have been calling in tips as well. Del?
Laura Jane, final question before I let you go, because we're going to go back to the White House press briefing in a moment. But the thing that stands out to me, besides that object you said on his belt, which appears to be the weapon that Kash Patel was talking about, is the backpack. It indicates that whoever is responsible for the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, this was a very well-planned situation, not just the backpack, but the fact that this person is covered from head to toe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was definitely well planned out. I mean, just even looking at the person's clothing, I mean, you cannot see any part of that body. And as I mentioned earlier, clearly it looks like an attempt that they didn't want any sort of piece of DNA or anything that was recognizable about them to potentially fall off or be left behind at the crime scene. They really took great care to wrap up their arms to their gloves or whatever they were wearing over their hands. It looks like there's lots of coverage there. And again, they're zipped up very high, and they do look like they have a backpack that's full of something, potentially tools or whatever they used to get Nancy Guthrie out of the house, if this person is also the kidnapper or if they were working in a group. At this point, we don't know that. We just see the one image of the one person, but definitely a huge development in this case that Savannah Guthrie has also posted these, hoping that anybody might be able to help recognize some of this stuff and help bring her mother home.
Coming up on Today's It Happened.
What Democrats propose is the definition of common sense. We simply want ICE to follow the same standards that most law enforcement agencies across America already follow.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News end of day snapshot of our biggest stories of the day. So why don't we pick up right where we left off?
What Democrats propose is the definition of common sense. We simply want ICE to follow the same standards that most law enforcement agencies across America already follow.
There have been good faith efforts. The Democrats, they didn't finally get text available until just this weekend. The White House is now responding to that, and I think it's important that we allow those conversations to go forward.
In Washington, Democrats putting up a united front when it comes to their hardball strategy on Homeland Security funding. For weeks, they have made their stance known: reform ICE and Border Patrol or no money for DHS. With a shutdown on the horizon, Democrats are holding the line. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, the clock once again is ticking. Where do things stand right now?
Well, look, it's not clear that they're going to have the ability to reach an agreement by that deadline of this Friday. Lawmakers still remain far apart. The White House negotiating with Senate Democrats, they remain far apart. It seems like Republicans up here on Capitol Hill are encouraged by what they see as progress right now. But at this point, it's really hard to say that they're going to be able to reach an agreement in time for that deadline. There's talk of a short-term bill to try and, again, keep the Department of Homeland Security funded for another short period of time, be it 2 weeks, possibly more. There's a lot of questions about whether Democrats would be willing to agree to that. A White House official telling my colleague Jacob Garden-Schwartz just a short time ago, quote, "We are continuing to have constructive conversations with members of both parties. President Trump wants the government to remain open and for critical services to remain funded." Now, up to this point, the parties do seem to be far apart, and there's a huge disagreement about exactly what changes could be reached. Now, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune just telling reporters that while these conversations are continuing, there are some areas where lawmakers can compromise and some areas where the White House is not likely to make agreements. Now, at this point, we don't know a whole lot of details into these negotiations, exactly what Republicans in the White House presented Democrats with yesterday. Either way, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling it woefully inadequate, making clear that they are not going to reach an agreement with terms that the White House suggested. So it seems like it's, in some ways Groundhog Day, Del. Both sides remain far apart. We don't know whether they will reach an agreement, and furthermore, what the terms are that they're negotiating. Democrats made that demand list of 10 different terms for changes to the Department of Homeland Security. Some Republicans calling them radical, others saying that there might be some common ground. A lot of questions about what agreements are on the table. Still seems like masks and the issue of requiring judicial warrants to pick up people who are in this country illegally, break down doors, go into homes. That could still be a gating issue for the negotiations here.
Nate, before I let you go, can Senate Republicans pass this legislation without the help of Senate Democrats?
They cannot. The filibuster rule is still in full effect. You need 60 votes to pass the vast majority of legislation. Remember, Del, Republicans only control 53, meaning some Democrats would need to cross party lines and vote with Republicans to get this thing across the finish line. Of course, there is the lingering question of whether it passes in the House of Representatives as well. Speaker Mike Johnson has pretty much a one-vote margin on the vast majority of votes, meaning that it's incredibly tight for Republicans in both chambers. They likely do need that bipartisanship to prevent another partial government shutdown. The problem with this one, if it does shut down on Friday, open-ended, we do not know how long it would take for them to negotiate a reopening of the federal government. At this point, they really have until just Friday at midnight before we are in yet another partial government shutdown, an open-ended one that would not so much impact ICE and Customs and Border Protection, which have their own pockets of funding from the Republican mega bill that was passed last year, but it would affect the TSA at airports, FEMA, and certainly the Coast Guard, all other aspects of the Department of Homeland Security.
Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, host of Groundhog Day on Capitol Hill. Nate, as always, we thank you. The three men in charge of carrying out President Trump's aggressive deportation policies appearing before Congress today. The leaders of ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and Citizenship and Immigration Services facing Democratic threats to shut down their departments if no significant changes are made. It is the first time since those agents shot and killed two American citizens, ICU nurse Alex Preddy and Renee Good, that mother of three. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us live now. And Stephanie, you've been listening to the hearings all day long. What have we learned so far?
Well, the biggest questions that I think a lot of people had coming into this hearing was around what's happening on the ground in Minnesota and what was happening leading up to those shootings and what has been, determined in the investigations afterward. But unfortunately, every time they were asked and they were pressed by lawmakers in these hearings, they didn't have anything to offer in terms of those ongoing shooting investigations, citing the fact that they were still underway. However, we did get from Todd Lyons, the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a couple promises from him. He promised to release the full reports to Congress once those investigations are complete, and he also promised to release body camera footage, saying that he supports that type of transparency, as we have a growing number of both CBP officers and ICE officers who are now wearing body cameras, and they are still trying to get thousands more on their agents as they're doing this work. But both the head of CBP and ICE defending the actions of their agents on the ground, saying that they have been trained in how to respond to various types of protesters. But the head of CBP arguing in the hearing today that he thinks the actions of some of the protesters really have gone too far. They've gone beyond what should be protected by the First Amendment. But he did acknowledge that there are, as he put it, several open investigations, Del, into the actions of CBP officers. So those could be civilian complaints, use of force complaints, and those investigations, of course, because they're ongoing, he couldn't offer up any specifics.
Usually these hearings show the Democrats being aggressive, the Republicans being passive. Not the case today, and not at least with all Republicans. Right.
We did get a couple Republicans on this committee who pushed back a little bit and at least had a few fleeting comments that weren't necessarily 100% towing the party line, if you will. That's what we often see in these hearings. We got a lot of questions from Republicans on sanctuary cities and the impact that those have in the efforts to enforce the president's immigration laws across the country. That officer stressing that it's safer for agents, it's safer for the public when they have that type of coordination and cooperation from the local agencies on the ground. And the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, saying that even very basic communication would go a long way. Take a listen.
But a simple phone call to let us know that that individual is going to be released, or if that individual is released, sharing that biographical data with us will go a long way. Because the last thing we want is a criminal illegal alien to go back into the community. And more often than not, they prey upon other migrants who are coming here for a better life, yet that they can hide in plain sight because these sanctuary jurisdictions won't just pick up a phone, notify ICE that they're being re-released.
So there were a couple moments of a little pushback, you could call it, of Republicans on the committee. One was Representative Michael McCall near the beginning, saying that he believes that Greg Bovino, who was in charge of CBP on the ground in Minnesota, that he escalated the situation. That was McCall's word. He also said that those roving patrols should be at the border and not in major U.S. cities. So those are two, notable elements there from a Republican. We also heard from Representative Gabe Evans from Colorado. He was running out of his 5 minutes of time. The chairman was very strict on the 5 minutes for each member today, but he raised the issue of the agents not having a judicial warrant signed by a judge when they are entering a home, saying that he wanted more information on that, but of course ran out of time in his 5 minutes to get that answer in person. So we'll have to wait and see what type of written response that he might get from CBP and ICE on the issue of warrants, which has certainly been a point of concern for some Democrats.
Yeah, interesting. The Republicans were saying they thought that Border Patrol should be on the borders and not necessarily in major cities.
Yes.
Scripps
Stood out to me too.
Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen. Stephanie, as always, thank you.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
If this isn't about legitimate law enforcement, this isn't about some legitimate crimes that were committed, then why is the Department of Justice doing this? And I'm far more concerned that this is much more about 2026 and 2028 than it is about 2020.
Thanks for joining us again on Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Or the FBI search warrant in Georgia has just been released. It follows that search of the Georgia election offices. It's now been weeks since that raid when agents seized hundreds of boxes of 2020 election records. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett is in our D.C. newsroom. And Avajoy, you've been poring over that search warrant. What have you seen so far?
Hey there, Del. Well, we're getting a closer look at some of the information that this judge may have used in order to grant a request from the administration for a search warrant to go into that Fulton County election office late last month. And we're now finding out that there are a few witnesses that officials recounted some of the details that they shared with other officials in order to give this information to the judge. Witness number one, as this person has been described, we don't have the names, but this person was described as witness number one, a chemical engineer in the state of Georgia. They claimed that the ballots, there were issues with ballot images from a recount, and the recount did not match the number of ballots that were actually cast. And then for witness number two, this is someone who is a Republican appointee of a Georgia state election board. They said that they reviewed ballots, and they said certain missing files was a sign that some of this data may have been manipulated. Now, keep in mind that these are allegations. The bar for someone to get a search warrant, it's really low. It's probable cause. It's not the highest bar that someone will need to obtain a search warrant. But all of this started at the end of last month when we started to see images of FBI agents and other federal agents outside this building in Fulton County, Georgia, and then eventually inside the building as they said that they had a search warrant and they wanted to go inside to gather certain pieces of information. And they eventually left with boxes of ballots. One election official said that they also had voter rolls that they were trying to acquire. Election experts are really concerned about this. Number one, because President Trump has repeatedly claimed that there was widespread fraud in the 2020 election. This is a state that he narrowly lost. We do know, however, that there were multiple court proceedings with regards to this matter, and they repeatedly lost in court. And another concern that officials have here, concern number two, election officials have, is that this is information that the administration could possibly use to sow doubt ahead of the upcoming election, the midterm elections later this year, and then ahead of the general election in 2028. Take a listen to what one election official told me earlier with regards to why they're really concerned about this update.
If this isn't about legitimate law enforcement, this isn't about some legitimate crimes that were committed, then why is the Department of Justice doing this? And I'm far more concerned that this is much more about 2026 and 2028 than it is about 2020, and planting the seeds of doubt about an election that the president may believe that his party might not do so well in. And that's really disappointing. It's putting tremendous pressure on the election officials in this country.
And recently, President Trump has been talking about allowing elections to be run from the federal level by the federal government. Keep in mind that the Constitution does not allow this. Elections are run by state and local officials. And David Becker, who you heard from there, reiterated the fact that U.S. elections are really secure. When you have thousands, tens of thousands in some instances of these folks who are working for these local election boards, it's much harder for the results to be tampered with. And just this morning, we should note that a federal judge rejected the administration's attempt in the state of Michigan to access or turn over voter information there. That is one of more than 20 instances where we know that the administration has filed lawsuits in order to try to get certain pieces of voter information from states. So we will continue to look out for many of these lawsuits that will continue, Del. But the big news this afternoon is this affidavit has been unsealed, and we are now getting a look at some of the pieces of evidence that this judge looked at and then granted the administration's request to go into the Fulton County election office, where officials there, federal officials, federal agents, FBI agents, searched that location and removed voter information from that location. One more thing that I want to point out to you, Del, this particular lawsuit that allowed the affidavit to be unsealed, officials there in Fulton County and the commissioners there, they also sued to try to get their voting information back. So this is just one of those side issues with the larger issue of the local officials there in Fulton County as they try to get the voter information back from the federal government, Del.
Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Ava Joy Burnett for us live in our D.C. newsroom.
Coming up on Today's It Happened.
I would be encouraging every resident property owner and people who own real estate there, check your properties for anything unusual. That could be evidence.
You're watching Today's It Happened, Scripps News recap of the day's biggest stories and events. So let's dive right in.
We continue to follow the breaking news coming out of Pima County, Arizona. The FBI releasing images taken from Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera. It shows an armed individual masked on the morning of the 84-year-old's disappearance. No one has seen Guthrie since January 31st. This individual appears to have tampered with the camera, but Director Kash Patel saying the FBI and a private party were able to recover the videos from residual data located in what are called back-end systems. Law enforcement expert Jeff Halstead joins us now. He's a retired Fort Worth police chief. And Jeff, good to have you back. Our Phoenix station, this is breaking news, in fact, right now, just reporting that police and the FBI are going door to door in the neighborhood of Savannah Guthrie's sister. What do you make of this latest development, and specifically in connection with the release of these videos and photos?
I'm glad you asked that question because it is related to the release of the video. So now they're going in canvassing areas. This is new intelligence, new information. A lot of things from this video prove to many of us in law enforcement, this looks like it was a property crime type of an event, not really targeting an elderly woman. With that said, the reason they're going canvassing is more than likely there is going to be evidentiary value in some of these properties. Remember, these are very expansive properties, quiet neighborhoods. I would be encouraging every resident property owner and people who own real estate there, check your properties for anything unusual. That could be evidence, shallow graves, a weapon, anything, because I think that's going to be trailed back to the evidence from this video camera.
Jeff, what makes you think this is a property crime, I guess, that might have gone bad?
Well, when you look at the video and the person approaching, you can tell they're not tactically sound. Let me explain what that means. It doesn't look like they're a professional killer, a person or anything like that. Tactics are very sloppy. The way that they're dressed, the way that the weapon is carried, and with those gloves on, you probably can't even get your finger in the trigger guard. So it didn't look like they were someone that was out to commit an extremely violent act. It looks like someone that was trying to defeat a security system and to somehow gain entry. What happens after that entry in those 41 to 42 minutes? That is the giant question as to what this person did once they were inside.
So, Jeff, how do we make that nexus between what you believe to be a property crime gone bad and a kidnapping where, according to the latest ransom note, may have involved $6 million in Bitcoin?
I'm still very skeptical about the ransom notes. It just did not fit the typical protocol of these high-level or high-profile type of kidnappings. All of them are very different. So let's get back to the nexus of this. Many times, someone that is intent on like a home invasion or a property crime mentality stumble upon a homeowner or an elderly person and they panic. They do some rash and unconventional things. That might be the case here, but then what happened in the first 48 hours is absolutely critical. That has long passed for now, but this evidence is key. Someone's going to know the shoes, the backpack, the jacket, something, and that's going to lead to specific intelligence leads, potential suspects, or persons of interest, and then this is really going to ramp up quickly.
Kash Patel, the FBI director, saying it took the FBI 8 days to get these images. This case is 10 days old. Based on your experience, were they withholding information as they were searching for the suspect already?
No, that's highly unlikely because of the high profile nature of this crime. You know, law enforcement wants to get information out as soon as possible because the public and our media partners is absolutely essential. It's the conduit of intelligence that comes in from millions of people watching these stories. Intentionally withholding, that's not the way that they do business. The challenge is older technology, historic technology, or technology that's not immediately available in the cloud. It takes time. Remember, there are specific scientific standards and protocols that have to be maintained and preserved in order for this evidence to be presented in court. And then getting that evidence and that data and those videos that are either logged over or traced over, it could take a lot of time. So this seems like a fairly common timeline with this type of technology and releasing the older videos.
Jeff Halstead with Genesis. Jeff, as always, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
A group of monks who have been walking from Fort Worth, Texas, have arrived here in Washington, D.C., the final leg in their 2,300-mile-long journey. And they arrived here at the Washington National Cathedral like rock stars to massive cheers at times from this crowd of thousands. And their message today was very simple, telling the people here to block out the noise, to really strive for mindfulness, kindness, and peace. And that peace, they said, doesn't come from the outside world. This is something that comes from within. And this is a message that is really resonating with weary Americans, some who feel like the nation is more divided now than ever before, who feel perhaps let down by their elected officials, who are perhaps struggling personally. One woman telling me she's here for the authenticity of these monks. And there are people in the crowd today from as far away as Washington State, from San Antonio, Texas, Portland, Maine, who just wanted to be here, they told me, to be in the presence of these monks. And it's really remarkable because when they began this journey in October of last year, it was kind of under the radar, and they have since amassed a massive following, millions of people online, and along the streets on their path, tens of thousands of people coming out to support them, perhaps an indication of what Americans are really hungry for right now in their country. But they arrive here in Washington, D.C. on day 108 of their journey. 108, a very symbolic number in Buddhism, representing the earthly desires and passions that can keep people from reaching nirvana. Very intentional, they say, that they are here to mark that day. Tony Waterman, Scripps News Group, Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a wonderful Tuesday night.